Colmes, in response to the massacre at Sandy Hook, an Ohio gun group is sponsoring a program to train teachers to carry and use firearms in schools. Similar programs reported in other states as well. Jim Irvine is chairman of the Buckeye Firearms Association and also the Buckeye Firearms Foundation. The foundation itself is the group that's sponsoring an armed teacher training program. And also with us is Shannon Watt. She has founded 1 Million Moms for Gun Control. Her organization was founded in response to the Newtown tragedy and already receiving lots of attention in the media and on the Internet. We thank you both for being with us tonight. Jim, let me begin with you. Why are you doing this?
Because we're sick of watching our kids get killed and not having the resources in the schools to save their lives. So we have an educational foundation. We thought, what better use of funds than to give our teachers, our educators, the tools and the skills necessary to stop one of these killers faster and lower the body count.
Why is that a bad idea, Shannon?
The idea of arming our children, creating this Orwellian society where we have to send our kids in bulletproof backpacks to a school protected by a shield, and then the good guys and the bad guys duke it out over their heads, that does nothing but put money in the pockets of the NRA and the gun manufacturers and the ammunition companies. But we are a developed country. We're a wealthy nation, and we don't need to behave like this, and it's time to decelerate the guns.
What do you say to that, Jim?
Well, we don't make any money off of it. We're spending $25,000 to arm some teachers on this, so that we're certainly not in it for the money. And it's really not about guns. It's about safety. This is about the safety of children. We've tried lots of different things, and the thing that stops somebody fastest is somebody taking action.
Do you have any data that guns in schools would be preventative?
Well, we've got guns in there's guns in schools in Ohio, Alabama, Utah, Texas, and I don't know of any shootings. That doesn't really prove anything, but people are always concerned about accidents and kids getting a hold of it. I don't know of any of that.
Well, as you know, there were some guards, 2 of them were armed at Columbine. That didn't stop it, so why would we think in the future it would?
Well, school resource officer is a great thing. It's any school who can afford one, I recommend having it. It's a great layer of protection. The problem is if your killer knows who it is who's armed, that's going to make it less useful to stop one of these types of attacks. Police officers are shot far more often than concealed carry license holders because they're uniformed and people can see them. The bad guy wants to take out the threat. That's the cop or the school resource officer. If nobody knows which teacher is armed, you can't do that.
Shannon, you don't think that would be a deterrent?
Absolutely not. Critics are always saying that we need to arm more people to stop shootings. If you look at other countries that are less violent, they don't have as many guns as we do. There were guards at Columbine, and 15 people still died. In other examples where armed citizens were able to thwart an attack, most of the responders were trained police officers or armed services members. Teachers are not equipped to do this, nor should they be. They should be at a school to teach. What we need to focus on is decelerating the arms race in this country so we don't need to worry about our children being shot at school.
We find out, for example, Jim, that in homes, more guns often means more homicides, more suicides, not prevention. And a number of studies have shown that the more guns you have, the more unwanted tragedies take place.
Well, if you dig down into those stats, they're kind of as useful as if people with a driver's license are more likely to be in a car accident than those without. So you might think, well, you're safer to drive with somebody without a driver's license. No, it's just the people with the driver's license are the ones driving the car. Also, the whole gang ownership of firearms really skews the data and has nothing to do with the average person in their house or what's going on in the schools. It's a kind of a nonsense comparison of things. One thing that Shannon mentioned was these are most often stopped by law enforcement officers. That's incorrect. Ron Borsch of SEAL here in Bedford, Ohio, has done extensive, exhaustive research on multiple victim killers. The bottom line is 2/3 of the time they're stopped by civilians or citizens, not law enforcement. 70% of that time they're unarmed. So we need to, guns aren't just the only thing, but change the mindset to help people understand what happens in these events so that they can interrupt them and stop them. We had a assistant football coach, Frank Hall, stopped a Chardon School shooting earlier, actually it was last year in Ohio, Cleveland suburb. He saved a bunch of lives. That guy is a hero because he took action and did something.
And who says that couldn't be replicated in other school potential tragic situations?
Obviously our schools need to be safe as possible, But the answer is not to arm teachers. The answer is not to give everyone a gun. The answer is to decrease the amount of guns that we have in this country, to reinstate the assault weapons ban, to limit the amount of ammunition that people can buy, to close the gun show loophole that the NRA has allowed so many people to buy guns without background checks, and then to put boundaries on some of the concealed weapons laws that are being created in the states that allow people to take their guns into churches and schools. It's ridiculous to think that we can continue to increase the amount of guns and not simultaneously increase the amount of violence.
I want to get some calls in there, but first, Jim, let me go back to you for a second because Holly Reedy, Chief Legal Counsel for the Ohio School Board Association, cites a law, 109.78 of the Code in Ohio, which says no public or private educational institution may employ an individual as a special police officer, security guard, or other position in which they're armed on duty unless they have a certificate proving they've completed basic peace officer training or have 20 years of active duty experience as a police officer. You're talking about 1,500 hours of training at the very least.
That's true, but what they miss is 2923.122 talks about the prohibition of carrying, and you can't carry in a school zone unless you're a police officer or any other person that the school board or governing body authorizes to carry there. So we're not talking about teachers being paid security guards. They're going to be teachers. They're just going to volunteer and be allowed to carry in a firearm, very similar to the Armed Pilots program that we put in place after 9/11. This was something people threw up the exact same arguments then, pilots' jobs to fly the airplanes, not do this. Program's been a success for over 10 years, and I promise you, and you can do the research, you know this, it has been a deterrent to terrorist attacks on the airplane.
But Reedy says the law will have to be changed in Ohio for this to be effective and for teachers to be armed.
I disagree with him on that.
And there might be a case to have to prove it. I mean, there may be a court case if you go ahead with this, or if teachers start becoming armed as a result of what you're doing. It may beg a court case, right?
I suppose. I think I'm not an attorney, but multiple attorneys I've talked to all agree that the school board has the power to authorize anybody to carry. That's what the statute says.
All right. Jim Irvine is with us. Also with us is we are talking with also Shannon Watts, who has started an organization online in response and gotten thousands of people responding very quickly after the latest schoolyard tragedy. Let's go to Joshua in Glenwood, Minnesota. Hello.
Hi, Alan. I just wanted to point out that a number of lawmakers and the president's children enjoy the protection of 11 armed guards at their school in addition to the Secret Service.
What about that, Shannon?
Well, yes, that's because he is the president and his children need protection. He is constantly under threat.
Why wouldn't that apply to other kids as well, then?
Why are his children more important than everybody else's?
It isn't that they're more important. It's that we don't need to create a country where every single child should be considered as being under threat. That's a concern.
But I think what Joshua is saying, if it's okay, if the president's children and other lawmakers' kids have special security with the idea that that therefore protects them, wouldn't that same concept apply to other children in other schools?
It would if you want to be in a country where we are ramping up the amount of guns that everyone has and everyone is always considered to be under threat.
All right, Chris in Chicago, hello.
I'm just a little concerned about who's going to pay for something like this. There's so many schools, especially in the city where I live, can barely afford to keep the building standing. Let alone.
What about that, Jim? Isn't there be a cost associated with this? And I know that the NRA is pushing. They'd like an immediate bill in January on this. It would really be a cost to the taxpayers, wouldn't it?
Well, I can't speak for the NRA's program, but our program that's why our foundation, we're paying for the tuition, we're paying for the ammunition, we're paying for the hotel and room and board while they're down there. Because the caller's correct. The school budgets and the cities are stretched too thin. They don't have it. So our foundation is going to pay for it, and we're looking for corporate sponsors to help because we've got almost 500 applicants for a 24-person class. So we're already working on new classes. And
you're talking about teachers doing it voluntarily. Chris is saying if you're going to arm guards or hire them, that's going to be a cost. There'll be a cost associated with that. Tim in Flushing, New York. Hello.
Hi, good evening. Great conversation. I have a question, comment. About 50 years ago, there were actually more guns in circulation in this country than there are today. But yet there was much, much less violence. So my thinking is that maybe we have a violence problem and not a gun problem. And my question is, if we just address the gun problem without looking to the underlying causes, Isn't that just sort of like going after the symptom instead of really looking at, well, why do we have all this violence in the first place?
What do you say to that, Jim?
I think he's right on this. It's not just about guns. We should be doing lots of things. If psychologists say we can't predict who's going to be the next guy to do this, but are there risk factors that we can identify and look to get somebody some help or treatment before event day ever happens? If we can prevent this event from ever happening or stop it before it gets on school property, that's the solution everybody wants.
All right, thank you for the call, Sir Shannon. We have a moment left. I want to give you a chance to respond to what Jim is saying here.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, this is not the kind of society that we want to live in as mothers. There are 80 million moms in this country, and I would urge everyone to go to 1millionmomsforguncontrol.org and join us and bring some sanity to this discussion. We don't need to ban guns, and we don't need to arm everyone. There is some middle ground where we can put some safe regulations in place and immediately address some of these horrible incidents.
Shannon, thank you very much for being with us. Jim Irvine of Buckeye Firearms Foundation, we thank you as well for your time.
It's my pleasure, Alan. Take care and have a happy New Year.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. We're coming